My mom is here. Yeah.
I'm going to talk to her.
Yeah, you will. Excuse me. I just had to tell her that my mom is here because Faith grew up in the church that my Third Reform, where my dad had served for quite a while. So, I don't know, little sidebar there. Sorry about that. We have been doing a series on men of excellence. Men of excellence. And so far we've talked about Noah, Adam, and Joshua. Thank you. Noah, well, it's a good thing some people remember these. Noah, Adam, and Joshua. Those are the ones that we talked about. Today we're going to talk about one that, for a lot of us, if you grew up in Sunday school, you learned a story about him, but we probably only learned one story of his life. Gideon. Gideon. Less is more with God. Well, this morning I'm doing something else different too. I have my little toy up here with me, my little iPad. I've never taught from this before here at Calvary. So if I lose it, just go with me, okay? I've never sort of, you spin it forward and whatnot, but since I was gone this week, I did all my teaching, all my preparation on this. So more is less, or less is more with God. Less is more with God. In 2003, a Blue Star mother, and do all of you know what a Blue Star mother is? There's Blue Star and Gold Star mothers. Gold Star mothers are the mothers who had a child killed in action in the military. So Gold Star mother. So if you go by any house and there's a Gold Star on the front of the house, some of them have Gold Stars in the front of their houses, that's a mother that has had a child die in action. A Blue Star mother, Marilyn, you would have been a Blue Star mother when Paul was deployed. My mom was a Blue Star mother when I was deployed just a few months ago overseas. A Blue Star mother, I don't know why they don't have a Blue Star dads, but they're mothers, is a mother who has a child, son or daughter, deployed overseas. And sometimes you'll see blue stars hanging from somebody's house. That means they have one of their family members deployed overseas. Well, in about 2003, Catherine Roberts from out east, her son Nathaniel was deployed. Well, Catherine had an ability that maybe today is sort of not in vogue, the ability to make quilts. I love quilts. I have a couple of quilts. I mean, they're beautiful. Quilts are amazing, and the handwork that goes into the quilts. Well, Catherine had the idea that with her son deployed, she wanted to be able to offer to him and then some of his other friends that were deployed a quilt. Well, from that, in 2003, early 2004, was started what's called the Quilts of Valor. Quilts of Valor. So just less than 10 years ago, 9 years ago, a single mom, one lady who quilted, started this program. Since then, up to date, they have given away 76,000 quilts. It has become an international organization of women and men. If you get online, you see that one of their favorite men that works on them he passed away, but he was a gentleman that had served over in World War II. And he was like 85, 90 years old working on a little sewing machine because he was wanting to give back to the younger generation of men and women who are presently serving. So one lady starts it less than 10 years ago with one quilt. Grown into the fact 76,000 quilts have been given away. Less is more with God. We tend to think we need to do these big things, but God says, no, I want you to walk in your walk that I'm giving to you in your life. Well, I don't have all the scripture up on the screen, so I encourage you, if you have your own Bibles, open them up, because we're not going to be looking on the screen. We're going to be looking at Judges 6 through 8. So Judges 6 through 8. If you don't have your own Bible when you leave, grab one from the information table if you don't have one at home. But Judges 6 through 8 is what we're going to be looking at this morning. It's the story about Gideon. And Judges 6 starts out by saying, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord. You got to think about, got to set the picture. The Jewish people have come through their 400 years of captivity. They did the 40 years in the desert. They moved into the land of Israel, and it's been about 250 years since they came into the land of Israel. They don't have a king. They don't have a president. What they have is judges. Men and women, Deborah was a judge. She was a woman. Men and women became the judges of the land of Israel, and they led the Jewish people. But there was a cycle that would take place. The judge would be alive, and he would call the people to follow Yahweh God. And the people would worship God. The judge would die, and they would run off and start worshiping anything else that they wanted to worship. And then there would be problems and calamity upon the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, and they'd cry out to God, and God would send them another judge, and then they would all say, yeah, we're saved, and then they worship Yahweh God. The judge dies, and they go back to worshiping all the different gods and Baals. They're in that cycle. And sometimes, if we really want to be honest with ourselves, don't we end up in that cycle too? God works in our life. God gives us blessings. We're close to the Lord. Then we start to slide away, start thinking, oh, we don't need to worry about worship. We don't need to pray. We don't need to read the Bible. We don't need to gather with other Christians. And we start sliding away, and then we start to have some testing, some trials, some issues in life. And we say, God, where are you? And he basically says, well, I didn't move. You moved. I didn't move. You moved. And then God comes back and he blesses us and we get closer to God. There's that cycle. Well, the Jewish people right now, the Hebrew people, are in that cycle. It's about 1170 BC. And for 7 years, God says in Judges chapter 6, verse 1, gave them into the hands of the Midianites because of the power of Midian was so oppressive. The Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in the mountain caves, in the clefts, and the strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites and other people would come in and they would steal all of the crops from the Jewish people. So harvest was going on, and somebody else came and stole all their food. The Midianites. They took their livestock. They were like a plague of locusts, so says the Scripture. It was impossible to count them, and they invaded the land, and they ravished the land. They took it all. I mean, how many of you would really like, if you were a farmer, you do all the work, and come harvest season, the other farmer next door, or not even the other farmer next door, the Canadians come down and take your land and take your harvest. We'd say, whoa, wait a minute, no, you can't do that. Well, that's what's going on here. But what's interesting here is some history. We got to see this history. Abraham is around 2000 BC. Most of us know Abraham's first wife was Sarah. Sarah had Isaac through the promise, goes through. Sarah, also within the history of Abraham, at first he couldn't have a child with Sarah, so he had a son with the slave girl, the handmaiden, Ishmael, of who the Muslims date their lineage back to, Ishmael. The Jews date theirs back to Abraham and Isaac. We as Christians go back to Abraham and Isaac. Well, after Sarah died, Abraham married another lady. And Abraham's second wife's fourth son, his name is Midian. The Midianites, who now in 1170 are descendants of Abraham. Now, that's a long time, isn't it? 830 years. We don't even know who our great-great-grandparents are, most of us. We don't keep track of that. They kept track of this. So Abraham's one son is where the Muslim people go back to. Abraham's other son, Isaac, is who the Jewish, who we go back to. But then another son of Abraham is Midian, who 800 and plus years later, 800 and 30 years later becomes a thorn in the side for the Jewish people. But even there's some more history here. Moses,